The air is alive with the energy of 1,000 hammering arms, each blow ringing out like a word in a great poem. Building, building, the heat rises off the sand, shimmering, dancing. You wipe sweat from your brow with a scrap of linen. Its coolness, a fleeting comfort against the furnace of the day. Your muscles ache in familiar ways, the way only a back-bent double under the weight of another sunrise can ache. There's a song in this labor, a song as old as the river, as timeless as the sunrise. You sing it not out of happiness, but because the song binds you to your fellows, links you in the chain of human endeavor. It is a song of those who shape stone and sand into monuments that will last when you are gone, of those who raise their voices to drown out the silence of the desert. The tools in your belt, an extension of your body, are worn smooth by countless hands before yours. Each tool has a story to tell. The pickaxe sings of stubborn stone, the hammer of unyielding granite, the chisel of delicate limestone, and the plumb bob, always seeking truth. In the symphony of creation, every instrument has its part. You, a single note in the grand composition, are indispensable. With calloused fingers, you trace lines along a block, making ready for the first strokes of the hammer. The work goes on around you, a constant hum of activity. Men squat, arguing over angles, their voices echoing across the site. Women pass up baskets of fresh water, their eyes keen and sure. Young boys, agile and quick, scramble up scaffolding, bringing down blocks as if by magic. Overhead a crane calls out, startling a buzzard into the sky. The foreman, his staff held high like a surveyor's rod, moves purposefully through the worksite, his gaze sharp and unwavering. He is the architect's voice, ensuring that every block finds its place. Every angle is true. The heat of the midday sun beats down. A hawk circles lazily overhead, a silent observer of the human drama below. The shadow of a passing cloud brings a moment's respite. You pause, head thrown back, eyes closed, in a rare moment of peace. The sound of the river, distant yet ever present, drifts through the heat haze. For a brief moment, the desert seems less harsh, the labor less arduous. You open your eyes and return to your task. The river is life, its annual floods bringing renewal to the parched land. The pharaoh, they say, is the embodiment of the river god, bringing order and prosperity to the land, just as the river does. Today, you work on a new pyramid, the tallest yet, a testament to the pharaoh's power. They say he dreams of reaching the heavens, of becoming a god himself. But for now, his greatness is confined to the confines of the worksite. Here, amidst the dust and the noise, the pharaoh is just another face in the crowd. Yet every block you place, every angle you true, brings him a step closer to the heavens. The river flows on, bearing life-giving silt to the fields beyond the city. The sun beats down relentlessly, but you do not falter. The pyramid grows ever higher, a beacon against the vastness of the desert. When the last block is in place, the foreman holds up his staff, and the workers fall silent. He turns to you, a rare smile on his weathered face. The pyramid is not yet complete, but you have done your part for today. As the sun dips toward the horizon, the work site empties. You and your fellow laborers pack up your tools, your steps lighter now that the burden of the day is almost done. The sky explodes in a riot of color as the sun bleeds into the horizon. The red of the pharaoh's courage, the blue of the endless sky, the gold of the gods themselves, all reflected in the depths of your own spirit. You walk toward the village, your muscles aching in familiar rhythms, your mind already planning tomorrow's tasks. The houses huddled together, a small oasis of mud, brick and thatched roofs. Laughter spills out of open doorways, mingling with the scent of roasting meats and baking bread. Children run barefoot through the narrow streets, their shouts echoing the joy of a day well spent. You greet your friends and neighbors, exchanging news and gossip. The bonds of community warm you more than any fire could on this still evening. The stars prick the darkening sky, cold and distant, indifferent to the dramas played out below. But here on earth, life is warm and vibrant. A stray dog trots at your heels, its tail a metronome marking the passage of time. Soon, the village will be asleep, lulled by the soft drone of crickets. But for now, there is still light in the sky and warmth in the air. You enter your home, a small but cozy affair, its walls adorned with the tools of your trade. Your wife greets you, her eyes shining with love and pride. She takes your hand, her touch as familiar and comforting as the linen cloth that wraps your waist. Your children, their faces smudged with dirt, rush to tell you of their day's adventures. Their laughter is music to your ears, a melody sweeter than any the bards have sung. You wash the grime of the day from your body, each movement a ritual as old as civilization itself. Water runs from a clay pipe, bringing the coolness of the river into your very home. You shave with a piece of sharpened oyster shell, its edge surprisingly keen, and as you scrape away the day's stubble, you contemplate the mysteries of the pharaoh's face, hidden behind the layers of paint and plaster. The great god, they say, is he too tired at the end of the day? His spirit, heavy with the burdens of his crown. The thought brings a wry smile to your lips. You anoint yourself with fragrant oils, the scent mingling with the smell of sweat and dust. It is a small luxury, a brief interlude between the grind of daily life and the solace of sleep. You dress in a simple tunic, its rough linen, a stark contrast to the fine garments worn by the nobles of the city. The day's work is done, but the rhythm of your life continues. The night is alive with the sounds of crickets and the distant murmur of the river. You sit with your family, sharing stories and laughter. Your son looks up at you with admiration, his eyes wide with wonder. You tell him tales of the Great Pyramid, of the pharaoh's dream of immortality. The boy listens, rapt, and you see in his eyes the spark of ambition, the desire to create something that will last beyond his own lifetime. You, a humble builder, are laying the foundation for his dreams. The darkness deepens, and you help your wife prepare for the night ahead. The oil lamp casts flickering shadows on the walls, painting grotesque shapes that dance and twist in the darkness. The smell of roasted meats and fresh bread fills the air. A feast fit for a king, though you're a builder and not a lord. You tuck your children into bed, their breathing slow, and even they dream of adventures. And you pray that their dreams will take flight and carry them beyond the confines of your humble village. You lie down on your reed mat, its surface cool and springy beneath you. Beside you, your wife stirs, her hand finding yours in the darkness. The rhythm of her breathing, the gentle rise and fall of her chest, lulls you into a state of peaceful awareness. In the stillness of the night, you drift into sleep, your dreams filled with the sounds and smells of the day. The rhythm of your life continues, a steady beat that echoes the pulse of the ancient world. The Nile flows on, carrying the dreams of 1,000 people towards the sea. And in the heart of the desert, a builder dreams of pyramids and the endless quest for immortality. The year is 2550 BCE in Egypt. The Great Pyramid of Giza stands, along with the Sphinx, having stood for more than 25 centuries, but this is a time before the Great Pyramid was built. A time when the pyramids were still medium-sized. This is a story about what life was like in ancient Egypt, told in an experimental format. You are a male peasant living in a village on the Nile. The Nile gives you life, but it does not yield. Every year, it floods, washing away the topsoil and leaving behind rich silt on which crops grow fat. It is a gift, but one that must be earned by yearly flood and yearly labor. Each year, you take up your hoe and dig ditches to direct the waters, plant rice and wheat and flax. Tend to vines trained up, trellises, and gathered their fruit into baskets. You live well, or as well as can be expected of a peasant. Your house, though humble, is sturdy, and you own it, free and clear. Its walls are made from sun-baked bricks. Mud mortar holds them together. Within, a bench and a table, fashioned from cedar wood, legs carved with the head of a baboon. Above, your reed mat, your bed, your world, all around, pots, pans, and shelves, holding grain and preserves, dried fish, dates, figs, and pomegranate. Tools hang on a peg by the door, baskets wait beneath them, ready to be filled. 2. One day, a crier comes to your village carrying a message from the pharaoh. The king needs laborers to help build his pyramid. He offers you a wage, you will earn a bonus for every month you work, and you may keep any valuables you find among the treasures of the dead. For many of the men in your village, this is a chance to earn riches. They pack a few belongings, kiss their families goodbye, and set off down the river road with the others. You consider staying behind, but a traitor lurks in every shadow. If word gets out that you resisted the pharaoh's call, soldiers may come to drag you to the riverbank. Soon, you, too, are walking away from all you know. Days on the road, weeks even, you march alongside hundreds of others, all headed to the same destination. Occasionally, someone is flogged for falling out of line, for lagging behind, for muttering discontent. It's enough to keep everyone marching steadily forward. Finally, you arrive at the construction site. Here, rows of tents have been pitched, housing the laborers like yourself. 3. You are assigned to the stoneworkers district. Your tents stand among rows of busy workshops. Hammers ring as artisans carve and smooth the limestone blocks destined to become part of the king's final resting place. Limestone is a highly prized material, durable, elegant, but difficult to quarry. To get at the stone, you must dig deep into the bedrock. Here at the edge of the desert, tall cliffs plummet suddenly into a deep ravine. Teams of workers use long hooks and wedges to dislodge huge chunks of rock from the cliff face. Then teams of oxen pull the blocks up a ramp and onto a waiting barge. Each piece is numbered so that no piece will be misplaced when it reaches the construction site. The blocks are loaded onto sledges, then onto boats and sinks, sailing up the river. From here, another team of oxen takes the blocks up a second ramp and into the heart of the complex. Here, the stone is sorted by size, shape, and quality. You're reassigned to carry stones from the sorting area to the masons, who are assembling the pyramid's lower courses. For every morning, the sun burns hot and the dust rises in clouds. You tighten the leather strap around your forehead and squint against the glare. You grab a block and start your trek up the hill toward the pyramid. You aren't allowed to climb the pyramid itself, but this eastern slope is steep enough. Along the way, you dodge donkeys laden with stone and supplies, their bells clanging loudly. You pass gangs of polishers working on nearly finished blocks, their rhythmic scraping audible above the din. Finally, you reach the top of the rise and drop your load near a pair of masons. They check the number on the stone and direct you to a new block, smaller and unmarked. You haul it up the next rise. This is your task, day after day, to carry stones, sometimes tens of thousands of stones, and to watch the pyramid grow ever taller. In the evenings, after the day's labor is done, you're allowed to explore the city. Once inside the city walls, you see the marvels of Egyptian civilization. Temples, palaces, gardens, great works of art and architecture, grand homes and bustling shops. Most of these wonders are forbidden to you, but you spend your meager wages at stalls selling food, drink, sandals, string, and other necessities. Or maybe you seek out a fortune teller whose tent shimmers in the evening light, offering glimpses of futures untold. Sometimes you meet up with fellow villagers, drinking beer and talking of home. The nights are warm. The stars blaze across the darkness, a million pinpricks of light. You lie on your mat and think of your family, of friends, of lovers. How many more months will it take to finish the pyramid? Will you earn enough money to go home and build a new house? Will you die here? Do the pharaohs really live on after death? Questions without answers. The pharaoh's face stares out impassively. His gaze, cold and distant, pierces the darkness. In the flickering torchlight, his image wavers, then snaps back into focus. How long will he gaze thus? Eternally. When the work is done and you are paid, you will throw your back into the earth. No one will remember your name. You will become part of the mound itself, entombed for eternity alongside kings and queens. If you survive, If you don't survive, the vultures will pick your bones clean. Hawks circle overhead. Their sharp eyes scan the ground for scraps. One lands beside you, pecking at the dust. It sees nothing of value here. It spreads its wings and glides lazily away. You swallow hard, tightening your grip on your tool. Not even the birds want this job, but someone has to do it. The supervising overseer barks orders. Without tools or skill, you might starve if you don't complete your quota. With aching muscles, you fling shovel after shovel of loose dirt into the basket at your feet. You look up at the pyramid, taking in its smooth sides, its perfect shape, its brutal immensity. You would rather be one of the craftsmen who chiseled its face, or the masons who laid its foundation. Those men created something beautiful. What you make is just another pile of rubble. You imagine yourself flung from the top of the pyramid. Your body breaks on the rocks below. Maybe it would be easier to die than live in service of this cold, dead pharaoh. Maybe if you work fast, you won't notice the pain. 7. The air hangs heavy. The sun beats down, baking the desert. You wipe sweat from your brow. Take a swig of stale water. The overseer barks at you to get back to work. You bend over again. As the hours crawl by, you lose track of everything but the rhythm of your toil. You dig and dig until your arms ache and your nails break. The sound of hammering echoes across the desert. Somewhere, a team of workers approaches, dragging a massive stone behind them. They pant and strain, but they move in unison, and the stone moves with them. The end of the workday arrives. Mercifully, you collapse on your mat, too tired to eat, too tired to do anything but sleep. But even in sleep, you are haunted by dreams of being buried alive beneath a mountain of stone. 8. The pyramid is almost finished. You look up at its peak, shrouded in mist. Only a few blocks remain before the capstone is set. The end is in sight, but the frenzy of work increases as the pyramid nears completion. You are whipped if you do not keep pace. You hurry, your steps echoing on the empty desert sands. You scramble up the incline, gasping for breath as you reach the top. The blocks are already set. The next team is waiting. One by one, the limestone blocks fall into place. They are hauled up, slid into position, wedged tight. The capstone is carried up the eastern slope. Everyone stops their work to watch as it is maneuvered into place. It fits perfectly. A murmur ripples through the crowd. You cannot believe the work is done. You stare at the pyramid, the monument to a dead man's hubris. You have nothing to show for your labor. Nothing remains but the pyramid and the scar on your back where the overseer cracked you for not working fast enough. You look to the east and begin your long walk home. Aox, finally, you are going home. After years of work, the pyramid is complete. The pharaoh who had it built is dead and buried within it. His servants were put to death, so that none could live to tell the tale of his passing. The work is done, and the city is preparing for the annual festival of the Nile. Boats glide through the water, decorated with bright banners and pennants. People cheer from the shore. Music rings out over the water, carried on the wind. Someone takes your hand and pulls you into a dance. You laugh and spin. For a moment, you forget the pain in your back, the ache in your shoulders, the toll the work has taken on your life. The Nile gives, and the Nile takes away. But tonight, you celebrate the giving. The festival goes on late into the night. The music swells and ebbs. The moon sails high in the sky. You stay out as long as you can, letting the rhythm of the drums beat out the tension in your tired muscles. When you finally go home, you sleep like the dead. So if you were to ask me, hey, David, who was the most interesting person to have ever lived? My answer would be an absolute resounding. It's a tough question because there's so many candidates, but up at the top of the list, I would definitely put He's an incredibly obscure figure from ancient Egypt, and yet there's something about his life and personality and appearance and everything that just fascinates me. Now, quick disclosure, I am working on a big project right now, so I am going to talk about some things that I know are going to appear in my work. So if you're sensitive to that sort of thing, maybe skip this episode until my thing comes out, but I can't really help it. This is why I make videos. Anyway, Akhenaten lived around 3,300 years ago, right in the heart of what we call today Egypt. But technically, it was called the New Kingdom. Also, I'm going to be using a lot of resources for this video, including my own research. But if you want to get more into this topic and support some creators, go check out a podcast. They have a whole 2-part episode dedicated to Akhenaten. And also, go check out a channel. They have a video on every single pharaoh of Egypt, and they even made this amazing video about Akhenaten's family tree. It's beautiful, really helped me. If you like this kind of content, be sure to support both of those creators. Now, I've actually been talking about Akhenaten since 2016. I did a video on the mysterious disappearance of his mother, Queen Tai, and last year, I actually wrote a piece about him, but I thought I knew relatively little about him at the time. And, compared to the previous eras of Egyptian history, the Middle Kingdom and the Old Kingdom, the New Kingdom is much better documented. Okay, so first off, let's clear something up. Akhenaten was not a woman. There's this popular meme that suggests that Akhenaten was a transgender woman, but it's just not true. I think it comes from people misreading his statues and seeing effeminate features and mannerisms. But it's simply not the case. Akhenaten was born male, and he died male. His wife, the beautiful Queen Nefertiti, was born female, and she died female. And I don't really want to perpetuate this rumor any further. But let's talk about his name change. Like I said earlier, he started off as and that actually means Amen is satisfied. Amen was the main god of the Egyptian pantheon at the time, and he was considered the king of the gods. So being favored by Amen was pretty huge. But Akhenaten changes his name to mean the spirit of Aten reigns. Aten was a lesser god at the time, often depicted as the sun disk, and during Akhenaten's reign, he becomes the only god worthy of worship. Akhenaten essentially rejects the entirety of Egyptian polytheism and declares monotheism. This makes him unique in the ancient world. There were other monotheistic prophets like Zoroaster, the author of Judaism's foundational text, the Torah, and even the first Christians. But Akhenaten is the only person we know of who changed an entire nation's religion. He was quite literally the first monotheist. We can tell how controversial this was by looking at his successor, Smenkhare, whose name means the beloved of Amen. He changed his name back to undo the damage done by his father. But it wasn't easy. Even 1,000 years later, the Jews were still worshipping Yahweh. So it must have been incredibly difficult for Akhenaten to do something so unprecedented. He rejected the beliefs of his people, the rituals, the temples, the art, even the names. This tells us something about his personality. He was bold and radical. He didn't care what other people thought of him. He was willing to shake the foundations of society to follow his beliefs. The nature of those beliefs is unknown, but it's clear that they were deeply religious. Akhenaten built new temples and resettled his people to a new capital. He surrounded himself with artists and commissioned thousands of artworks depicting himself, his wife and their children basking in the rays of the Aten. The artwork was shockingly modern. Western art wouldn't become naturalistic again until the Renaissance, so it's incredible that Akhenaten was able to see past the rigid conventions of his time and commission such free, flowing pieces. The famous sculpture of Nefertiti is from this era, and probably my favorite artwork of all time. He completely rewrote the rules of art, but he also completely rewrote the rules of war. Akhenaten liked peace. He disliked violence. He refused to wage war against his neighbors, and instead preferred diplomacy. This, of course, led to problems with Egypt's foreign policy. The Hittite Empire had previously been an ally, but when they asked for chariots from Egypt, Akhenaten refused. He also failed to defend Egypt's southern border, which eventually led to an invasion. The invaders pillaged the countryside and demanded tribute, but Akhenaten refused to give them anything. He continued his peaceful ways until he died. We're not even sure he wanted to be pharaoh. At one point, he designated his wife Nefertiti as his co-regent, and it's likely that she helped rule in his place. We even have some sculptures showing her smiting their enemies. So maybe he wanted to live a spiritual life and left the dirty work to his wife. It's unclear how the population felt about all of these changes, but it seems like many Egyptians embraced Akhenaten's reforms. After his death, people as far away as Syria converted to At, and even though it fizzled out after Akhenaten's reign, it shows that his ideas had some merit. People naturally gravitate towards simplicity, and monotheism is a simple concept. Instead of worshipping a bunch of gods with different myths and legends and names, why not just worship one? Unfortunately, Akhenaten's experiment didn't really work out. His successors abandoned his religion and persecuted his followers. But he changed the hearts and minds of people for centuries to come. As for Akhenaten himself, he left just as abruptly as he arrived. We don't know how he died or when. There's no tomb, and there's almost no records of his later years. There are some theories suggesting that he suffered from a disorder, but there's no real evidence. I personally think he appeared frail because he was trying to depict the human form naturally. He didn't want perfectly chiseled abs or bulging biceps. He wanted to show his slim waist and skinny arms, because that's how normal people looked like. Back then, everyone was malnourished. Whatever happened, his reign came to an end and he was forgotten. His monuments were defaced and his name was carved out of the records. But here, in the hush of this evening, we remember him again. Not as a villain, not as a saint, but as a man who stood beneath the sun and believed he had found a truth no one else could see. A man who changed the gods and was, in turn, unmade by them. That's all I have for this episode. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave a like. I'll see you next time. Bye. This is the incredible story of King Tut, and thank you so much for joining me today. Soft background, faint echoes of footsteps in a stone corridor, gentle desert wind through a narrow passage. Let the sun drift lower now. Let the voices of kings and gods soften to whispers behind heavy stone doors. Now, imagine yourself in another place, and another time, still thousands of years later. It is the early 1920s, and beneath the sands of the Valley of the Kings, a lantern flickers in the darkness. A man crouches low, brushing fine grains of dust from a stone step. The air is heavy with silence, dry, still, and ancient. The man's name is Howard Carter, and he has been searching for years. Searching for a tomb. One he believes lies hidden where others have long since given up hope. He brushes again, stone. Then, another. And then finally a sealed doorway, marked with faint cartouche. Behind it is something untouched. A royal tomb, nearly whole. And so begins the modern legend of Tutankhamun, boy king who ruled briefly, died young, and was buried in haste, only to sleep beneath the desert for over 3,000 years. The tomb is small by royal standards. The corridors are narrow, the chambers few, but within them lies a dazzling array of treasures, golden shrines, alabaster jars, furniture, chariots, statues, and above all, a mask, smooth, luminous, unmistakable, blue and gold, calm and watching. The face of a forgotten king. The world knows this face today. But 100 years ago, it startled a handful of men. Men who had expected to find nothing. Men who had despaired of ever seeing glory like this beneath the sands. It is a beautiful thing. The mask of Tut, and it speaks of a craftsman's skill, of a lost world, and of a king who never forgot he was divine. For the headdress is not just ornament, it is a sun crown, the cobra in place, and the broad lapits that flare like flames. This is a pharaoh, the earthly vessel of Horus, come to judge the dead. But there is more to the story. As workers begin to excavate the tomb, rumors start to spread. One by one, those who entered begin to fall ill. One dies of blood poisoning, another from pneumonia, a third collapses suddenly, without explanation. Newspapers whisper of a kursan, ancient vengeance unleashed by disturbing the sacred rest of a pharaoh. A cobra symbol of Egyptian royalty is said to have eaten Carter's pet canary the day the tomb was opened. Lord Carnarvon, the wealthy patron who funded the dig, dies unexpectedly from an infected mosquito bite, just weeks after the discovery, and in Cairo, the lights are said to have flickered and failed at the very moment of his death, but behind the myth, there is quieter truth. Of the dozens present at the tomb's opening, most lived long, full lives. Howard Carter himself died many years later, at the age of 64, peacefully and at home. The so-called curse likely began not with the tomb, but with public imagination. It was a time of mystery and fascination with the East, of shadowed tents and camo caravans, of cursed amulets in dusty markets. The idea of ancient revenge fit all too well into popular fantasy. In reality, the tomb's dangers were more mundane. Air sealed for centuries, rich with mold and dust, may well have carried pathogens. Stone walls, painted with vivid pigments, flaked into particles when disturbed. The physical labor of the excavation took a toll. And yet, the myth endures, because the tomb itself seems like something from a dream, a chamber lit only by lamplight. The golden sarcophagus resting beneath layers of shrine and coffin. The silent mask, eyes forever closed in serene authority. Tutankhamun, the boy whose reign was unremarkable, has become the most famous of all pharaohs. He died around the age of 18. We do not know exactly how. Perhaps an injury? Perhaps illness. He was buried quickly, possibly due to political unrest. His tomb, likely intended for someone else, was reused. Small, hurried, but sealed. And in that sealing, he was preserved. Not in memory, not in legend, but in airless silence. For over 3,000 years he waited. And when at last his tomb was opened, he emerged not as a ruler, but as a symbol of mystery, of the unknowable past, of how even the smallest voice from antiquity can echo louder than all others. Tutankhamun, the boy king, lies beneath the desert, his tomb discovered, his legacy secured, his story almost wholly invented. Let us be clear, there is much we know of ancient Egypt, its art, architecture, and achievements. But for the specifics of any one ruler, we usually have little more than what we choose to read into the record. We do not know if Tutankhamun had ambitions or fears, hopes or dreams, if he was beloved or reviled, powerful or powerless. In fact, we don't even know if he chose the name Tut. That title, like so many parts of his story, comes to us via translation, interpretation, educated guesswork. There is no surviving record of how he pronounced his own name. So, we call him Tutankhamun, though it might have been Tutu, Cam, when Tutmos, or anything else. When Carter first found the tomb, he didn't even know who lay inside it. He would only piece together the identity of the boy king through comparing the artifacts with other sites, checking measurements against old texts, and slowly reassembling the history that had been half buried for millennia. Most of what we think we know about Tutankhamun comes from one source, the Amarna letters, written 3,400 years ago during the 14th century BCE. These clay tablets were sent between rulers across the Near East, discussing trade, alliances, and enemies. And amid them, the name Tutankhamun appears again and again. Sometimes he is spoken of proudly, sometimes with confusion, sometimes dismissed entirely. Here is one such letter, written in the Akkadian language of the Mitanni kingdom to the Egyptian court. I am writing this letter to you, that my heart may be glad, that you may tell me the whereabouts of my servant, the superintendent of my chariots. He went up to Thebes 7 years ago, and has not returned. My messenger went to the house of Raya, and asked for him. But they said, what do you want with him? I beg you, inquire diligently about him, and send him back to me. Here is a hint at a young ruler in need of guidance, perhaps a bit naive, a bit lost. Again and again, the same question. Where is the pharaoh? Where is Tutankhamun? Where is the boy king? The records cannot tell us what happened next. They cannot tell us who he was, or why he matters to us, but they can tell us that he existed. In the end, these are the foundations of the legendary King Tut, and we build from here. From the scant evidence of his rule, we assemble a picture of a life cut short, a legacy abandoned, and a name erased. For it was not just the Egyptians who called him Tut. The Greeks adopted the title, rendering it as Tuthmosis. Over time, they gave him new titles too. The heretic king, the boy king, the pharaoh of the sun. The myths grew until he became the stuff of legend. And with that, let us take our leave of the tomb. Step gently, mind the low ceiling, brush the sand from your sleeves as we return to the daylight. But keep the silence with you, like a shadow of gold in the mind's quiet places. Thanks so much for joining me today. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb is one of the most significant archaeological finds of all time. What was it like to live in an Egyptian villa? Well, let's find out. Welcome to my channel. Today we are in ancient Egypt. The year is 3000 BCE. Now I know that the Nile flooded last season, ruining many of the crops, but a new year brings new hope, and with it, new prosperity. We are here to help you experience daily life in ancient Egypt. Whether you are living in the heart of Thebes or working in the fields, our goal is to make ancient history come alive. So join us each week for a new adventure. Today we are visiting a villa near Thebes. Let us leave the tomb now, its chambers hushed and dark, and step into sunlight once more. But not the harsh sun of the quarry. This light falls gently through painted shutters. It glows on polished floors. It dances on still pools of water, shaded by palm trees. You are now in Thebes' city of nobles, priests, and bureaucrats. The air is warm, but not stifling, fragrant with incense and the faint sweetness of pressed dates and lotus blossoms. And you are inside a villa, a home of wealth and comfort. The exterior walls are simple, whitewashed, discreet, but beyond the doorway, everything changes. A columned courtyard opens before you. Its centerpiece, a rectangular pool lined with lilies and blue-painted tiles. The water is calm. Goldfish flick their tails just below the surface. Along the walls, vines, climb trellises, and potted sycamore trees reach for the sun. A servant pours cool water over your hands from a long-spouted jug. The clay smells faintly of the river. Your feet rest on woven mats. Your robe finely spun linen clings lightly to your shoulders, pressed with fragrant oils. You are of the upper class, perhaps a scribe who has risen in rank, perhaps the wife of a temple overseer. You do not labor in the sun. You do not rise before dawn to cut stone or grind grain. Instead, your mornings begin slowly. There is fruit on the table, figs, dates, melons, jars of honey and beer, bread made by kitchen staff who began baking hours earlier. You walk through shaded halls where scenes of your family's ancestors are painted on the walls in ochre and lapis. One holds a sisterman ancient rattle used in temple songs. Another is shown making offerings to Osiris. You stop for a moment, say nothing, but you remember the names. In another room, your children are at lessons. A tutor recites texts from long scrolls, stories of gods, of justice, of the stars, hieroglyphs inked carefully on sheets of papyrus. The afternoons are quiet. Perhaps you oversee the running of the household linen inventories, guest preparations, perfumes mixed in alabaster jars, or you rest, reclining on cushioned benches, shaded by curtains of dyed cloth. Musicians play soft melodies from harps and flutes. A breeze from the garden carries in the scent of mint and corn. In the evenings, the house fills with low laughter and soft voices. Guests arrive in white robes, their wigs freshly oiled, their collars heavy, with beads of carnelian and turquoise. There is food goose, lentils, pomegranate, wine served on polished trays. Nothing is rushed. No one shouts. The evening moves like the Nile, slow, deliberate, serene. You pass through the rooms with ease, pausing at carved door. The villa is more than a house. It is an inheritance, a sanctuary. The walls speak of lineage, of honor, of order. But outside these walls, the world is not always so calm. Taxes must be collected. Crops must be counted. Soldiers march in distant lands. There is unrest sometimes, famine, flood. But within the villa, life remains measured. The rhythm of the privileged class is one of routine and ceremony. Baths scented with rose water, scrolls unfurled in the library, pet monkeys and cats lounging in the shade, painted servants fanning away flies, and always, always, the quiet presence of the gods. A small shrine in a corner, lit by a single oil lamp, an offering of bread, a whispered prayer. The night draws in. A servant lights the lamps, one by one. You move to your sleeping chamber. The sheets are linen, smooth and cool. You lie back. The ceiling above is painted like the night sky, stars in deep blue and silver. Your breathing slows. Outside, the frogs begin to sing along the Nile. Inside, the house rests. The gods watch over all. Ancient Egyptian homes were mostly made of mud brick. Only the wealthiest could afford to build houses of stone, which may have been whitewashed to look like this. The wealthy would also hire architects to design elaborate courtyards with pools, fountains, and gardens. Most people did not have access to running water, but a wealthy home might have pipes to carry water from the roof to a central courtyard. These carried away waste too. Archaeologists found toilets underneath floors in some of the largest houses. Those without plumbing facilities would use a wooden stool. At the time, no one thought indoor plumbing would ever go out of style. Egyptians believed in keeping things nice, so they put a lot of effort into decoration. The walls were painted with murals. Furniture was inlaid with ivory and precious stones. Many items were imported from other countries. Because of Egypt's wealth, the country had access to materials that most others could only dream of. The color of walls, furniture, and clothing indicated a person's status. The pharaoh and his close family were allowed to wear the royal colors of gold and red. Everyone else wore green and blue. The elites could even use the color red on special occasions. Their homes were decorated with paintings of the royal family and scenes from the pharaoh's victories. The rest of the population had to be careful what they painted, because the wrong scene could get them in trouble. Lower-class citizens could only paint scenes from nature, never from mythology. Some rich people enjoyed collecting art. They would purchase paintings and sculptures on trips around the empire. Others preferred books. The Royal Library of Thebes contained hundreds of thousands of papyrus scrolls. People were employed to copy important works of literature so that others could enjoy them. They also built large houses for guests who came to visit. Since not everyone could afford to travel, travelers would stay for weeks or even months. Because of this, there was usually a spare bedroom available. The beds were typically made of wood and covered with linen. Wealthy people liked to sleep on mattresses filled with wool, flax, or down feathers. Most families owned several sets of bedding and would wash them frequently. Clothes were another sign of wealth. Nobles wore linen garments, and only the very rich could afford to own multiple outfits. During religious festivals, people would often dress up in costumes and parade through the streets. The finest clothes were saved for the pharaoh. His garments were made of linen, cotton, and hemp. He wore a double crown of gold and a beautiful beard made of precious metals. The poor lived much differently. While the rich could afford to buy food, the poor grew their own crops. Farmers planted wheat, barley, flax, vegetables, and fruit. After the yearly flood, the soil was extremely fertile. Farmers would harvest twice a year. They also raised animals for food, including geese, cows, pigs, and sheep. The poor caught fish in the Nile and hunted birds for food. On rare occasions, a wealthy person might gift them with delicacies such as honey or exotic fruit. The wealthy ate 5 meals a day, while the poor ate 2 or 3. They also had different kinds of food available to them. The rich could eat figs, grapes, apples, pomegranates, and lotus blossoms, while the poor mostly ate onions, garlic, and leeks. The poor cooked their food over an open fire, while the wealthy ate from silver trays and golden plates. They had special tools for serving and preparing food. The wealthy drank wine from golden goblets, while the poor drank beer from clay cups. Ancient Egyptian society was structured. Those at the bottom were farmers and laborers. Above them were scribes and artisans. Merchants and officials were next, and at the top were the priests and the pharaoh. With the exception of the pharaoh, anyone could advance in society through hard work and dedication. The poor could work their way out of poverty, and the rich could fall if they lost their fortune. As you can see, there were both similarities and differences between the lives of the rich and the poor in ancient Egypt. I hope you enjoyed seeing a day in the life of an ancient Egyptian. If you have any suggestions for future videos, please let me know in the comments below. Remember to subscribe for more adventures. And thanks for watching. The wind moves through the tall grasses, just barely rippling the surface of the water. From deep within the papyrus thickets, there comes the muffled sound of frogs and dragonflies. Skim the surface of the pool, their wings making tiny and every now and then, somewhere deep in the darkness, beyond the light of the moon, an owl lets out a lonely hoot. Welcome back to Egypt. Today we head south to the region of the First Nome, also known as Thebes. A team of French archaeologists has recently uncovered the remnants of a vast complex near the modern town of They think it may have been a sort of administrative center of sorts, perhaps for counting heads or the collection of taxes. In fact, evidence suggests that this site was occupied not just during the New Kingdom when the great temples nearby were being built, but all the way up until the Greek and Roman periods. What can tell us about how ordinary people lived under 5 different pharaohs spanning almost 2,000 years of history? Let's find out. The complexes we're talking about today weren't used for worship, nor were they connected with any kind of large-scale construction project, like the building of temples nearby. This would suggest that these buildings were used by people who came from the central government, people whose job it was to help administer the affairs of the kingdom. Their work was probably pretty dry and boring, but sometimes in the small moments between filling out forms and stamping seals onto clay tablets, they would look up at the grand temples that they had helped build and be reminded why they were here in this god-forsaken wasteland of sand. The largest temple in the area is the Temple of Amun-Akhet. Construction started during the reign of Menahotep II, who unified Egypt after the Intermediate Period. His successors, the 18th dynasty, went on to expand the complex greatly. Over the next few centuries, though, it fell into disrepair. Then, about 400 years later, under the likes of Ramesses III, it began to be restored once more. Later still, Alexander the Great came and made offerings here. And finally, after he was gone, his general Ptolemy I built a small chapel to his god Serapis right across from the main sanctuary. Here, far from the bustle of palace courts and merchant bazaars, the bureaucracy of the Egyptian state and the shifting sands of the desert were almost tangible. The architecture itself might have been mostly reused, but these civil servants brought with them the culture of the capital. Memphis in the early Ptolemaic period was essentially a Greek city, and so scholars think that this type of work wouldn't have been seen as menial at all. On the contrary, it was a desirable position and one that could bring a person quite close to the seat of power. After all, it wasn't for nothing that the Romans called Memphis the second city after Rome. Even so, this doesn't mean that the workers didn't face hardships. Just because a person was laboring on the construction of a great temple, does mean that their job was easy? Bureaucrats have to meet quotas too, and if your numbers aren't good, you don't get paid. So imagine that, in the stifling heat of the summer, you've got hundreds of houses to check off your list. Every doorway represents a few families, each with their own story to tell. And while you're just trying to keep track of who owns what, you've got a landlord breathing down your neck, demanding to know why things aren't moving faster. There would have been a lot of time spent walking between houses, checking the quality of construction, and looking for anything that looked suspicious. If someone was cheating on their taxes, you would want to know. The workers' housing wasn't exactly luxurious, but it was functional. Each house was built out of mud brick, much like the rest of the buildings in town. That's not to say that some folks couldn't afford nicer homes. However, in fact, evidence suggests that this town was home to some pretty wealthy people as well, and their homes would have been quite nice indeed. Unfortunately, we haven't found any of these rich folks' houses yet, but common folk would have lived in houses like this one. It was a one-story structure consisting of a few rooms arranged around a courtyard. In the center, a heavy wooden door would open up into the main hall, which probably doubled as a living room and bedroom. One wall was made up entirely of windows, letting in as much natural light and airflow as possible. On the opposite end was a kitchen area, and just behind that, there would have been a small bathroom with a toilet made of stone. The toilet would have been shared with the rest of the family, just like everything else. The family would sit together on mats on the floor. Men, women, and children would eat together. They would work together. They would pray together. Life would have been tough, but they'd see each other through it. The workers might have been busy counting heads and collecting taxes, but the pharaohs were just as busy waging war. fighting enemies, and smiting those who oppose them. In the midst of battle, the soldiers would have prayed for divine favor. The priests would have prayed for divine favor. Everyone wanted divine favor, but the pharaoh, more than anyone, to understand what divine favor looks like, we'll head north to the Valley of the Kings to check out the tomb of Tut. This famous king died young, around age 19, but his tomb was still filled with treasures, likely because it was hidden away for several centuries before being discovered by accident in 1922. Tutankhamun ruled around 3,000 years ago, but his tomb looks like it could have been made yesterday. Of course, this is partly due to the incredible skill of his craftsmen, but is also thanks to the fact that many of his possessions have simply never been moved. Since Howard Carter found the tomb, everything has been carefully preserved. Even the debris that covered the entrance has been left in place. This isn't to say that you can't visit the tomb yourself. In fact, tourists come from all over the world to marvel at its beauty. However, the inner sanctum where the sarcophagus sits is strictly off limits. This means that nobody has disturbed the final resting place of the boy king in over 100 years. Of course, most of us will never get to see what lies behind that sealed door, but since it's been kept so clean, even the dust hasn't had a chance to settle. It feels as though the workers who crafted this tomb did their jobs just yesterday. And so when the priests came in to worship the young king after his death, they would have felt as though they were visiting him in the next room. In truth, his tomb was designed to feel just like his palace. It was a place of comfort, not decay. Not every pharaoh had such beautiful tombs built for them, though. For the majority of Egypt's history, the Valley of the Kings was reserved for those monarchs who died in battle. Those who passed away in peace would instead be buried in the underground labyrinth of the necropolis at Abydos. Unlike the Valley of the Kings, only the wealthiest could afford to be buried here. The tombs themselves were carved into the hillside, much like the pyramids were, and were filled with treasures, just like Tutankhamun's tomb. This one belonged to a man named Jed Thoth, who lived in the 2nd century BC, during the reign of Ptolemy VIII. He held the title of governor of Thebes, so it's very likely that he lived in our town of El Kab and oversaw the collection of taxes from the locals. Unlike the riches of Tutankhamun, however, most of Yet Thoth's treasures have been looted throughout history. Looters came through at least 3 times, with the last visit being sometime in the 6th or 7th century AD. The result is that his tomb is now pretty bare. Still, we can picture how vibrant it must have been in the days before looters came through, when the paintings were fresh and the gold gleamed on the walls. During the days of the pharaohs, the dead were venerated as members of society. They were given proper burials, both above and below ground, and were given offerings of food and drink. After all, ancient Egyptians believed that the afterlife was just like the life that was lived on earth, except that it lasted forever. So at the end of the day, whether you were a poor peasant or a high official, you would want to be comfortable. This was especially true when it came to burials. Just like they did in life, the Egyptians carried on in death. And so, we have endless examples of graves being decorated with the belongings of the deceased, from furniture to clothes to food and drink. The Egyptians believed that the afterlife was a continuation of life on earth, and so it made sense that they would want to be surrounded by all the comforts they had grown accustomed to. As we watch the sun rise over the desert, we realize that it is dawn on a brand new day. The bureaucrats have finished their work for now, and the farmers have returned to their fields. Life goes on as it always has in Egypt. The sun rises and sets, the Nile flows ever northward, and the wind whispers stories of old.